Imagine watching thousands of people ride a totally terrifying loop-the-loop roller coaster.
Right, just a total thrill ride.
Exactly. And like half the riders are throwing their hands up, crying, screaming, and just pure emotional catharsis.
Yeah.
But the other half, they are sitting deadpan in the front row with like a calculator furiously trying to compute the structural integrity of the tracks while they're upside down.
That is the perfect analogy for what we're looking at today.
It really is. Everyone in our data set today is saying the season 5 premiere of The Boys is an absolute disaster. But here's the crazy part. They don't even agree on why.
No, they don't.
And then you look at the other side of the internet, and those fans are calling it a flawless, 10 out of 10 masterpiece. So welcome to the deep dive.
Thanks. Yeah, it is a genuinely massive, messy, and frankly, highly emotional data set of raw audience reactions pulled straight from Reddit.
So messy.
Right. And our mission today isn't just to summarize the plot of this premiere. I mean, the episode is titled 15 Inches of Sheer Dynamite, which is a lot.
It sets a tone, for sure.
It really does. But our goal is to deduplicate these raw ideas, categorize the absolute chaos of the comment sections, and explore how an audience can violently disagree with each other while fundamentally misunderstanding their own disagreement.
Exactly. And we're skipping the gentle introductions today because this premiere drops you straight into the deep end. Our target audience already knows the stakes.
Yeah, we can assume you guys are caught up.
Right. So Homelander is consolidating power. Ashley Barrett is his VP. The Starlighters are being actively hunted. And our core crew, Huey, Mother's Milk, and Frenchie, are trapped in Freedom Camp 47.
The tension is just suffocating right from the jump.
Totally suffocating.
Right.
And reading through the audience reactions to how this episode unfolds, it really goes back to that roller coaster analogy.
It does.
To understand this totally fractured audience, we have to start with the most heavily debated moment of the entire hour, which is the death of A-Train.
Which is just a brilliant place to start. It perfectly encapsulates the divide between the emotional viewer and the analytical viewer.
Definitely. Let's just lay out the facts of the scene real quick. So A-Train gets this massive, undeniably epic hero moment.
Oh.
He arrives at the internment camp to save Huey and the team, and he utilizes this incredible time-freezing super speed.
Right. Commenters were instantly comparing it to those classic cinematic Quicksilver sequences.
Oh, totally. You know the trope, like, a character moves so unbelievably fast that falling debris, or in this specific case, Homelander's deadly eye lasers, are just hanging totally frozen in the air.
Yeah, it looks amazing on screen.
So A-Train scoops up the team and takes off running through the woods with Homelander in pursuit. But then he falls out of super speed. And why? Specifically to avoid hitting a female pedestrian who steps out into the road.
Right, which is a deeply deliberate choice by the writers.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a direct, undeniable parallel to his inciting mistake in the very first episode of the series.
When he recklessly ran straight through Huey's girlfriend, Robin.
Exactly.
It's a total full circle moment. So A-Train tumbles, Homelander catches up to him, and instead of begging for his life, which is honestly the cowardly thing A-Train has done for 4 seasons, he just laughs.
Yeah, he just totally tracks up.
He looks Homelander dead in the eye and tells him that without his powers, he is nothing but a pathetic, sniveling loser. And Homelander snaps his neck.
Boom. And the reaction data on this specific death, it just completely splits the internet in two.
Oh, completely.
So let's look at the emotional, positive reactions first. These viewers were quite literally sobbing, like flooding the forums, calling it a perfect 10 out of 10 redemption arc.
People were devastated, but in a good way.
Right. The consensus in this camp was just how beautiful the poetry of the moment was. His dark journey started because he accidentally killed an innocent woman because he refused to stop running. And his journey ends with him willingly giving up his life because he finally chose to stop. They loved that he stripped away Homelander's psychological armor and died without fear.
I hear that, I really do. But I have to advocate for the analytical critics here for a second, the ones on the roller coaster with the calculators.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because if you read their comments, they completely ignored the poetry and immediately attacked the mechanics. They called out the Speedster logic.
Right, the Superman problem.
Exactly. And frankly, they have a really good point. If you establish that A-Train can move faster than light, if you literally show the audience that he can perceive Homelander's lasers in super slow motion.
You break an unwritten contract with the audience when he suddenly gets caught in a foot race?
Yes. And furthermore, if his perception of time is basically frozen, why couldn't he just, effortlessly step around the woman on the road?
Just gently move her aside.
Right. Why did he have to crash? Doesn't that just signify lazy writing to force a plot point.
Well, see, it is a totally valid mechanical critique.
Yeah.
But I would argue it isn't lazy writing. It's more of a calculated sacrifice.
A sacrifice?
Yeah. This brings us to the core thesis of our data set today, the feelers versus the thinkers. The writers of the show clearly made a deliberate choice to sacrifice mechanical, physical logic in favor of narrative poetry.
Interesting.
For the feelers, A-Train didn't die because he was suddenly too slow, or because his top speed was, like, artificially nerfed by the writers.
Right.
He died because he finally, unequivocally, chose to be a hero. And being a hero, in that highly specific thematic moment, fundamentally required him to stop running.
So basically the mechanics don't matter if the metaphor lands.
For half the audience, yes, absolutely. But the thinkers feel deeply betrayed by the established rules of the show's universe.
Yeah, they ate it.
When the rules of physics or power scaling in a fictional world are arbitrarily broken, it pulls the analytical viewer right out of the immersion. Neither side is factually wrong, They just value different currencies in their storytelling.
The feelers want catharsis, and the thinkers want consistency.
Nailed it.
Think about your own favorite shows for a second, right? How would you feel if the writers suddenly changed the rules of magic or science in Season 5 just to make you cry? It is a tough pill to swallow.
It really is.
Now, if A-Train's death was about sacrificing internal logic for emotional payoff, our next category of audience division is about sacrificing narrative satisfaction for real-world satire.
Ah, yes.
Yes.
You're referring to the fallout of the Flight 37 video.
Yes, I am. So for 4 solid seasons, Starlight and the boys have been holding on to this devastating blackmail video.
Yeah, it's the smoking gun.
Exactly. It shows Homelander explicitly letting a plane full of innocent people crash into the ocean. It has been their absolute nuclear option for years.
Yeah.
In this premiere, Starlight finally presses the button and broadcasts it to the entire world. And what happens? Sister Sage and VP Ashley Barrett instantly neutralize the threat.
Just immediately shut it down.
Yeah. They go on television, calmly claim the video is an AI deepfake, and they even release a purposefully altered version of the video, giving Homelander 7 fingers just to prove how fake the original is.
Which is just, wow.
And the public completely buys it. Meanwhile, Homelander's followers continue running the internment camps, and we see the Deep and Black Noir hosting what is essentially a manosphere alpha male podcast.
And we should definitely clarify for the listener exactly how that podcast functions in the narrative.
Good idea.
The Deep and Noir are weaponizing male insecurity and grievance to radicalize their listeners. They are effectively normalizing the atrocities happening at Freedom Camp 47 by framing them as, necessary measures to protect traditional values.
Right.
Now, looking at the data set, the audience division here is incredibly sharp. And as we dive into this, it is crucial to note that we are simply reporting on the audience's takeaways here.
Yes, very important caveat. We aren't taking any political sides today. We are objectively analyzing how the internet reacted to the mirror this episode held up to society.
Exactly. So on the positive side of the data set, a huge chunk of fans absolutely praised this.
They loved it.
They did. They thought it was a sharp, painfully accurate satire. They pointed out that dismissing hard, objective evidence as fake news or blaming it on AI is exactly how modern political discourse operates right now.
Oh, for sure.
They loved that the writers captured that terrifying reality where objective proof simply doesn't matter anymore. And they specifically pointed out how brilliant it was for Sage to add the 7 fingers to exploit the public's current technological illiteracy.
It's a smart move in universe. But the negative reactions were just as loud, if not louder.
Sure, yeah.
A massive portion of the audience felt the satire was entirely lost. For them, it didn't feel clever, it just felt exhausting.
Yeah, too bleak.
Exactly. They argued it was far too on the nose and just deeply depressing. But their biggest complaint was actually structural.
Right, from a storytelling perspective.
Yeah. Releasing the heavily anticipated Flight 37 video, this smoking gun that has been built up for literal years only for it to do absolutely nothing, felt incredibly anticlimactic.
Oh, I totally get that.
It is honestly worse than anticlimactic. It's not like bringing a get-out-of-jail-free card to a poker game. It's much worse.
How so?
It's like Starlight hauled a massive chest of solid gold into a market that has suddenly collectively decided that currency is a myth.
Ooh, that's a good way to put it.
Right. The gold is objectively valuable, but in this new reality, it is utterly worthless. It completely deflates the tension. So I have to ask, are we sure this isn't just a massive pacing failure? Like, why build a weapon for 4 years just to have it misfire?
Because the misfire is the point.
Really?
Yeah, the writers have engineered this anticlimax deliberately. The audience realizes, in the exact same horrifying moment as Starlight, that truth has suffered hyperinflation.
Wow.
It is no longer a viable weapon against fascism or corruption. And this forces the audience and the characters into a space of critical thinking.
So it's forcing a pivot.
Exactly. How do you actually defeat an omnipotent villain when the concept of objective reality is no longer believed by the public? It removes the easy narrative way out. It forces Butcher and the boys to abandon traditional justice and find a much darker path forward.
That makes sense. Speaking of audiences feeling robbed of their currency, let's talk about another completely broken contract with the audience.
Uh-oh.
This was easily the most universally jarring audio experience of the premiere, and it deeply divided the fandom on the actual technical quality of the writing and production. We need to dissect Kimiko.
Yes, the introduction of her voice. This generated a staggering amount of vitriol in the dataset.
Just to catch everyone up, Kimiko has been entirely mute for 4 seasons. Her silence is a core part of her character, deeply tied to her trauma.
Right.
Her ability to communicate without words, especially with Frenchie, was her trademark. But suddenly, in this premiere, she can speak.
It was a shock.
We get this quick exposition dump explaining she spent a year in Manila undergoing intense speech therapy and apparently just doom-scrolling TikTok.
Which is hilarious.
It is. But as a result, her spoken dialogue is exclusively this crass, aggressive Gen Z internet slang. She casually strings together phrases like Great Barrier Quoof and threatens to tit-slap her enemies.
Yeah, and the reaction data on this is heavily skewed negative. A massive portion of the audience complained about the actual technical execution.
The audio mixing, right.
Yes. Many commenters seriously question if the showrunners used an AI voice or just incredibly bad ADR automated dialogue replacement, where an actor dubs their lines in a studio after filming.
It did sound a bit off.
They complained that her voice sounded disconnected from the physical environment of the scene. And beyond the technical complaints, they found the TikTok dialogue to be incredibly cringe.
Yeah, they felt it ruined her.
Exactly. They felt it completely ruined the mystique of a deeply emotional, nuanced character.
But wait, if you dig into the defensive comments, there is a very vocal camp arguing that this is actually brilliant world building.
Oh, for sure.
Logically, it makes perfect in-universe sense. If a deeply traumatized adult with zero social filter learns conversational English primarily by watching abrasive internet videos for a year, of course she's going to sound like a brain-dead teenager.
Which presents a fascinating psychological dilemma regarding audience expectations.
Break that down for me, because I don't really buy that bad audio mixing is an intentional creative choice.
Fair enough.
Is the audience right to be annoyed by this jarring ADR, or is this actually a genius meta joke by the creators to make her first words intentionally uncomfortable?
Well, it might actually be a technical failure, but the psychological reaction from the audience goes much deeper than audio mixing.
Okay, how so?
In television, the audience constantly demands character growth. They beg for their favorite characters to heal and overcome their trauma.
Right.
But the moment you fundamentally alter the status quo of a beloved character, like taking away the muteness that defined Kimiko's unique, silent dynamic with Frenchie for years, the audience often violently rejects it.
Oh, because it shatters the idealized version of the character they had in their heads.
Precisely. Her silence made her an idealized, tragic figure whose actions spoke louder than words. Giving her a crass, annoying voice forces fans to reconcile that tragedy with a messy, uncomfortable reality.
That's rough.
Whether the audio mixing was genuinely poor or intentionally jarring to reflect her unnatural new voice, the psychological result is the same. The audience is deeply uncomfortable. They wanted her to heal, but they didn't want the uncomfortable reality of what that healing actually sounded like.
That is so interesting. And that feeling of unnatural character evolution actually perfectly mirrors the primary analytical criticism of the entire episode.
Which is a great segue.
Right. It brings us to our final major category of audience division: the narrative velocity, the plot armor, and the pacing.
The premiere certainly does not hold back. I mean, the sheer volume of plot resolution crammed into 1 hour is staggering.
Staggering is a very polite word for it. The episode moves at an absolute breakneck sprint.
It really does.
Just look at the checklist of events. Butcher confronts and murders his own cancer-ridden father using his horrifying new tumor powers.
That was intense.
Then the team executes a wildly elaborate prison break by recruiting a soup named the Worm. And by the way, commenters were hilarious about this, pointing out he is basically just Mulch Diggums from the Artemis Fowl books.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah.
Digging tunnels by eating dirt and excreting it behind him.
Gross, but effective. During this escape, Starlight manages to blind Homelander with a flash of light just long enough to fly multiple people out of the camp to safety.
Right.
And in the background of all this, Mother's Milk finally gets his revenge and kills Love Sausage, the soup with the prehensile anatomy.
It is a relentless sequence of events.
Totally.
And the audience division here is just a classic clash between spectacle and structure.
So true. The structural critics in the comments came out swinging with literal lists of massive plot holes.
The lists were endless.
They wanted to know, how did Homelander, a being who uses X-ray vision constantly to spy on people, suddenly forget how to see through walls when Butcher and the boys were hiding in the dirt tunnels right under his nose?
Valid question.
And if Homelander can fly fast enough to catch A-Train in mid-sprint, how in the world did Starlight and Frenchie manage to fly away after just a momentary flashbang?
Also valid.
And zooming out, why did the writers resolve the massive, apocalyptic Season 4 cliffhanger of the internment camps in just one rushed, chaotic episode?
Well, the fans who focused on spectacle completely ignored the mechanical loops and logic. They just loved the breathless, high-stakes action.
They were just along for the ride.
Exactly. They specifically pointed out the sheer visceral terror of the forest chase, with Homelander screaming William into the darkness as he hunted Butcher. For those fans, the sheer momentum of the episode completely paved over any narrative plot holes.
I look at it like a magician's sleight of hand.
Okay, I like that.
As long as the magician keeps moving, as long as they keep creating sparks and pulling doves out of hats, you don't notice the coin they dropped on the floor.
Right.
But the internet loves to hit pause, zoom in, and find the crane on the floor. And I have to challenge this writing strategy. Is winking at the camera and relying on momentum a valid excuse for ignoring your own universe's rules?
That's off balance.
Are writers essentially forced to sprint to the finish line, abandoning logic just to tie up loose ends?
What's fascinating here is that the writers actually seem to be incredibly self-aware of this exact structural criticism.
Wait, really? How so?
There is a specific piece of meta-commentary hidden in the dialogue of the Worm during the prison break. Right as the chaos is peaking, he explicitly complains, finales are the worst.
Oh, a literal meta joke about the final season.
Exactly. The writers are openly acknowledging to the audience that tying up all these sprawling storylines, neutralizing these god-tier powers, and wrapping it all into a neat, perfectly logical bow is fundamentally impossible.
Because the power scaling is too extreme.
Yes. If Homelander uses his powers logically, everyone dies in 5 seconds, and the show ends. They know the pacing is rushed, and they are essentially telling the audience, buckle up, the mechanics are going to be messy, but we have to keep moving.
Okay, let's unpack everything we've synthesized from this deep dive today.
Let's do it.
Looking at this massive raw data set of Reddit comments, it is incredibly clear that the audience is fractured right down the middle. You have thousands of viewers violently arguing in the comments about whether 15 Inches of Sheer Dynamite is a masterclass in television or an absolute disaster.
Yes.
But when you really drill down into the data, they aren't actually arguing about the objective quality of the show. They are arguing about how to watch TV.
Absolutely. It comes down to what you, as an individual viewer, value most in your media consumption.
Right.
Do you watch for the emotional poetry of a moment?
Right.
Are you willing to forgive wonky speedster physics or jarring dialogue changes if it means experiencing the beautiful catharsis of A-Train's redemption or the terrifying reality of a deepfake?
Or do you watch for mechanical consistency?
Exactly. Do you demand that the physics, Homelander's X-ray vision, and the narrative pacing adheres strictly to the established rules of the universe, regardless of the emotional payoff?
So the next time you finish watching a new movie or a highly anticipated premiere, and you find yourself either totally in love with it or absolutely furious, take a step back.
Ask yourself some questions.
Exactly. Ask yourself, am I reacting right now as an emotional viewer, just enjoying the thrills of the roller coaster? Or am I reacting as an analytical critic, checking the structural integrity of the tracks?
Both perspectives are entirely valid, and both are necessary for a healthy fandom. But as our dataset proves today, they almost never agree.
You really don't.
And before we wrap up this analysis, I want to leave you with one final lingering thread drawn directly from the depths of our source material today.
Ooh, okay.
Think back to A-Train's death. We discussed how he died laughing at Homelander, telling him that without his powers, he's just a sniveling, pathetic, invisible loser.
Yeah, that was a huge moment.
Now, given that the anti-supervirus storylines and the concept of depowering have been heavily hinted at throughout the series, consider this possibility. What if Homelander's ultimate punishment in this final season isn't death?
Oh, man. That is a dark thought.
What if the series ends with Homelander completely stripped of his powers, forced to live out his days as the ordinary, invisible, powerless human being that he so deeply despises?
Wow.
How would the emotional feelers and the analytical thinkers react to that finale?
Oh, the structural critics would probably calculate the exact dosage of the virus needed, while the emotional fan would just revel in the poetic justice. It would break the internet in half all over again.
It totally would.
Keep pondering that theory the next time you see a deepfake video online, or the next time you find yourself diving into a messy data set of angry internet comments. Until the next deep dive, keep questioning the tracks, but don't forget to enjoy the ride.